In chapter 12, I'm moving out of the New Testament and I'm looking specifically at the Old Testament. And in this chapter, I'm going to deal with the issue of the character of God. The reason this is so important in the broader question of the trustworthiness of the Bible is, can you trust a Bible that presents a God who does what the God of the Old Testament does? That's the question. Part of the theological answer is the balance of love and holiness. God's love moves him to forgive. God's holiness leads him to punish. He has to do both in order to be true to his character. And so much of what happens in the Old Testament is this balancing act between God being a kind, compassionate God, forgiving to the thousandth generation, and the fact that sometimes his patience simply wears out and his righteousness demands that he punishes. The flood is often used as an example of an evil God that shouldn't be worshipped. But the fact of the matter is, God's not evil. The world had become so evil that in order for him to be a righteous and holy God, he had to punish the sin, and that meant killing everything and almost everyone. The killing of the Canaanites is often used as an example of a genocidal God who involves himself in ethnic cleansing. But the fact of the matter, there is no ethnic cleansing. The Canaanites were evil. They had been given 400 years to repent. They refused. And so God's justice leads him to punish sin. So it is this balance of God's holiness and his justice that explains so much in the Old Testament. But if you increase the size of your circle, you come to a much broader question, and one that is much more difficult to deal with, and that is, how can an all-good, all-loving, all-powerful God allow such suffering to exist in this world? It is a real question. I think it's one of the core questions that all of us have to struggle with. And if the Bible doesn't have an answer to this, then why believe the Bible? Well, certainly part of the answer is faith. We, by faith, believe that God is all good, all loving, all powerful, and allows pain to exist. Now, that argument is not going to convince the skeptic, but for us it makes sense because it's simply something that we have to believe. But there's other answers to the problem of pain and suffering in the Old Testament. One is the reality of human sin. Adam sinned. Eve sinned. We too have sinned, and there are consequences to violating the character of God. And as you start to look at all the pain and suffering in this world, you realize that you can trace it back often to the consequence of human sin. But for Christians, there's another answer to this question. That is Satan. We believe that there is an individual who's the embodiment of all that is evil and wants to drag everything and everyone that he can with him into hell. And that explains some of the reality of pain and suffering. But the most difficult issue, I think, is natural evil. How can an all-good, all-loving God allow earthquakes and tsunamis and this kinds of things? Well, we'll talk about that in the book. For me, I've had to come to the conclusion that justice is what God does. If God does it, it is just because his actions are an expression of his just and holy and righteous character. And I have to believe that by faith. But I also understand that God is not a nanny. And some people think that God should recede into the background, and then when we're going to hurt our little finger, he should come in and he should take care of our little finger and then reside into the background and leave us alone. There is no God like that in the Bible. God is not our nanny. He is the omnipotent, all-powerful, and all-loving, holy God who creates and sustains all of life and to whom all of us answer. I choose to believe in that God.